Hi, I'm Mark. Welcome back to Foothill Paint Fabrication. Today we're going to be working on the 1950 Chevy truck right side door. It's rusted out on the bottom on the inner panel. A lot of times you'll see the outer skin and the inner panel rust out, but on this particular truck only the inner panels are rusted out. So we've got a patch panel here, and that's what we're going to be working on today. So let me bring you in close and we'll take a look at the damage. Okay, here's the damage. It's pretty extensive. You can see, it's rusted all the way through. And I was planning on cutting right along these screw holes or just above or below them, and then having this weather strip metal piece. This is the part that holds the weather strip down on the bottom of the door here. Just cover that up, and that would have been nice because I don't have to finish that weld that well. But unfortunately, this thing is pretty heavily pitted all the way up, pretty high. It's been painted over the years to, kind of mask it, but I think I'm gonna have to go up a lot higher to get into some decent steel. It's pretty nice right along this angle right here, and I think that's gonna be the game plan. Now, this patch panel that the owner bought, it looks like it matches pretty well. We're gonna take some measurements, get my contour gauge in here to make sure this matches the door pretty well before we start cutting anything apart. But I don't want to get up too high. Now this panel itself, it's got the little recess for the access panel here, but on the other end, there's no little low spot. It's not been pushed in for the hinge pocket right here. So if you're going to use one of these, you're going to have to make that pocket yourself. And I really don't want to go into that anyways. I want to use as much factory steel as possible. So we're going to make this patch as small as possible. Now, since we're not changing the outer skin, we come into another problem. Where the skin bends over and crimps onto this piece, it's rusted away pretty bad. I mean, it is, there's not much left. It's all the way up to about 1/8 of an inch from the lip here. It basically disintegrates almost completely to the lip, and it's pitted so badly that I really can't reuse it. Now, I could try to cut close to the top and then weld a new piece on there, but it's going to be counterproductive because I'll be basically working on the edge. So I think the game plan is going to be for me to take a grinder or a sander and just sand this lip on an edge right here until this piece falls off, and then we'll cut a strip, and then we'll just have to weld a new strip. We'll just fusion weld or a TIG weld right across the top here and weld that back on. It's not ideal. If this skin ever needs to come off, it's going to be a bear, but I don't see that happening. And if it needs to come off, they're going to have to cut this piece out anyway. So that's kind of the game plan right now. Let's get the contour gauge out here and make sure that this patch panel matches this door pretty well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and push this down on the patch panel, my contour gauge here. I'll push that down on there. Then we'll lock it, and then we're going to see if this shape fits on here. Slide that in there. And that looks pretty good. It's not perfect, but it looks way close enough for the bottom of a door. So I don't think we're going to have any trouble fitting the patch panel onto this little section right here. So let's move forward and start taking this door apart. All right, let's go ahead and get the guts out of this door. The owner wanted them out so he can clean them up, get them lubed up and working really well before the truck's put back together. The door latch has to come off anyways because all the paint needs to be removed off of it, and the door will be painted with the latch out. So let's start with the internal handle. Gotta push that out of the way to get this one last screw out here. Then we'll take this and we'll just rotate it up, and it'll hit the little spot right there, and we'll pop it out. Now this is the right side door, so I'm going to go ahead and label this with a little R. just so there's no confusion when the truck goes back together. Okay, let's get this window crank mechanism out of here. Okay, we got them pushed down through. All we have to do is slide it out of the slider in here. And finagle it all out. All right. The regulator and everything looks really good on this, so I think it just needs a good cleaning and lube. All this lube in here is dry and hard, so we're going to go ahead and put an R on this one as well. Okay, to get the latch out, we need to remove the window guide channel that's trapping it right here. So there's 2 screws right here, and they're that funky kind of a rectangle shape. I forget what that bit's called, and I actually don't have that bit. But I have a little square bit that fits in there pretty good, and I was able to dig all the paint and goop out of these 2, so I think they're going to come out pretty easy. Yeah, that square bit worked pretty good. There we go. And they're just like big old wood screws almost. So now, allows us to get, if I can manage to get it out of there. There we go. So that allows us to get this piece out right here. And that's where the 2 screws held it on. And this pushes right up against this latch. So you could try to bend it out of the way and get the latch, but that's not advisable. So you should really just need to remove it. And let's get these big screws out of here and then get this latch out. If you guys don't have a screwdriver that's big and bulky for these big heavy screws like this one I actually destroyed a little bit by accident on the tip. When I was doing some electrical work, I burned it back, and I ground this flat, and it's nice and thick now, and that's what I use on all these size screws. That it works out really well, fits in there perfectly. It was just a cheap Harbor Freight screwdriver anyway, so now I get a lot of use out of it, and it rarely slips on these big screws. All right, let's get the last one out. So that's 3 screws on the side and just 1 on the top here. Get that out of there. And it needs a lot of cleaning too. It's just got old goopy grease in there and some flash rust and everything else. So it needs to be cleaned up. And then lubed, and then get all this paint off here and back just to the plated metal. But I'll let the owner take care of that. I'm going to put all the screws back in it, and we've got this door stripped down. All right, I've gone back and forth on what I want to do with this lip here. I know you guys probably can't see, but right there's 1/8 of an inch maybe left before it gets to the top here. And then the rest is just as bad. Got a spot over here about the same. So I keep going back between patching it or just cutting it, cutting across here and just peeling that away, cutting this, lay the other piece, make a strip, and then just weld it right here on the top. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dolly this, make sure it's nice and straight first. It's got a couple little hoop-de-doos in it, but we're going to get this nice and straight. And then I'm just going to take a grinder, probably a sanding disc, and just sand along this edge right here until I see the seam. And I'll probably do it on an angle like this, like I mentioned earlier, so I leave the majority of the skin even where it rolls over a little bit. So when I'm welding, I'm welding a little bit more on this side, not straight up on this top here. So I think that's our first step to get started on this. And then I can lay the patch panel in here right up against the skin, and then figure out about where I'm going to cut the patch panel, lay the patch panel down, scribe the door, then cut the door, and then fit the piece. So let's get a sander out here and start taking this lip off here. Okay, I decided to use a grinding wheel at first. I got a really flat one here, and I'm just going to lay it along here and look for the seam to start to pop. It'll probably start to turn blue, so I know it's right there on the edge. So we'll just kind of hit this real quick. I don't know if you guys can see it, but you can just see little hints of blue starting to show, meaning that I'm getting through. It's getting hot really easy, so I can just see a little faint line of it right here. So I'm just going to keep working my way down until I see that, and then I know that I'm basically through, and I'll probably just try to pry that off there and break it off. All right, finally got it up. Only one spot weld still had some life left in it. The rest were all just rusted away. So I got it pried up. As you can see, there is really nothing left, and this is paper thin, what is left, so there's no way I could have reused it. So even if I cut down as close as I could to this lip here and try to weld a new piece on, it wasn't going to happen. It would just blown through. There's just not much left of it. So I'm just going to bend this back and forth and break it off here. And we'll worry about replacing that later. Next is to figure out how the patch panel is going to fit. Get it laid down inside here, and then make a rough cut on the patch panel, and then lay it in here and then scribe that. So as it wraps around the corner, it gets a little tricky. So we're going to have to go underneath this little lip right here, or cut it right here and not disturb the pinch right here, which may be the game plan. So we may stay up a little high and then splice it in, but I got to get in there a little bit, feel around, see how bad the rust is first. Okay, I got everything cleaned up, and I think I've got a game plan here. So I think what I want to do is I want to go right along this edge right here till it comes to this corner, and then we'll come out at an angle right there, and then we'll go straight across, but we're not going to go down the top, or we're not going to go in the valley. We'll split the difference, go right down the middle. That way this ridge will help keep the door skin flat, and then this valley will help keep the patch panel flat. So this piece will stay on the patch panel, and this piece will stay on the door. And then coming down, you guys can see how bad this is. Coming down on the other side, pretty much exactly the same plan. This is all real solid in here, so I'm just going to cut right on this lip and then over to at an angle and then just straight across. Now I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and flange the door. That way the panel will sit flat, the patch panel will sit flat, and then I don't have any clecos, so I'll probably just put some 2 or 3 sheet metal screws along here, maybe 4 or 5, to hold it all together while it's being tacked. So let's go ahead and get the patch panel laid out and cut, and then we can lay it up in here and scribe to the door so it's a perfect match. Okay, I had to move the camera a little bit because the sparks are going to throw right at the lens, and I don't want to destroy that lens. So I just clamped it to the skin here on reverse side, and that'll hold it good enough. I don't have to chase her out on the bench. So I'm just going to cut along this line, and then I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and go off at an angle here. Make sure I miss that side. And the same thing over here, just to get this big chunk out of the way, and then we'll go from there. Okay, that's cut. Now you notice I don't do a plunge cut and just bury it and go along. It eats up your wheels really fast. There's a guy on YouTube, Fireball Tool. He did a little scientific study with slow motion camera, and he showed if you plunge cut, you get, I don't know, he did a plunge cut on pieces of sheet metal studs. I think he got 6 cuts. And when he did where you just kind of cut a little bit at a time, I think he got 60 cuts with the same wheel. So, you know, plunge cutting really eats up the wheels pretty fast. And you could see all the carborundum from that wheel when you plunge cut. So something to think about. If your wheels are going away real quick, don't plunge cut. Just kind of cut it back and forth like that and let it cut through slowly. And it is slow, but it saves your wheels. So, all right, I'm going to cut these other 2 pieces off camera here real quick. I'm going to slide them out of the way and probably have to move the camera so I don't ruin it. All right, the next thing we need to do is get this piece out. That's actually this piece right here. So we need to get that out of the way so we can lay that up flat so it's in the right position. So we're going to lay the new piece in, and that's fitting pretty good already. Look at that, huh? Yeah, it's going to go in nice, as long as I don't screw it up when I weld it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this. I'm going to get it left to right, and I'm going to clamp it to the lip here, and then I'm going to scribe, and then we can cut that piece on the corners and get it out of there. Now it's not sitting down as far, but if it goes down farther, the line actually goes that way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to scribe, and then we're going to cut on the opposite side of the line to make sure we have plenty of material. I want to have a big gap. Okay, so I can see my scribe in there. What we're going to do is we're going to take the Dremel tool, if I can get it over here. So we're going to take the Dremel tool, and we're just going to cut way on this side of it. So I'd rather have too much, so when this goes back on, we're going to be cutting on this side of my scribe, leaving plenty, and then we can trim it back later once we get this piece set in there correctly. Okay, I just jammed the awl in there to separate the skin from this piece to make sure I didn't hit it at all, and I didn't. So, and the Dremel tool comes in really handy on stuff like this. I've got a bunch of these little wheels. They're really cheap, so and it comes in handy to get these little tight corners and stuff like that where you can't get the bigger cutoff wheel. So I'm going to do this to the other side, and then what I'll probably do is just make a quick cut right here with the big saw, and the same thing on the other side, and just peel this rotten piece out of here, and then we can lay that other piece up in there and scribe out. All right, let's make a little final cut here. Okay, it's a rusted part. As you can see, none of these panels back in the day, they didn't dip them, they didn't spray them, they didn't do nothing. It was just bare steel. Stuck it all together and sprayed paint on the outside, and that was the end of it. So we don't really need this piece for anything. It looks pretty good up inside here. We got some scale rust right here. I'll get all this cleaned up, and then we're going to take a look and see how this piece fits here. But it's looking pretty good already. It's way too tall on this side. This lip is way too big, but all in all, we are looking very good. All right, let me get this cleaned up. I want to get all this cleaned up real nice before I move forward and do anything else. Make sure there's no piles of rust or anything bent or anything holding me up. So I'll do that real quick off camera and then we'll come back. Okay, I got that wire wheeled out real nice. I got the piece put in here. It's clamped down left to right. It's looking really good. This way it's looking really good. I'm really happy the way everything's turning out. My 45 cut on this piece came out perfect. There's plenty of material to trim either off this or off that. On this end, I screwed up a little bit, and I cut, and there's going to be a little bit of a gap there. So I'm going to have to add something back onto the patch panel, then recut it to make that go away instead of just trying to fill that void. I'm going to actually add a little bit to the patch panel, grind it smooth, then trim it to match. I just screwed up. I should have measured twice and cut once instead of just measure and cut. So, but before I scribe this, so we can lay out our lines for the cut, I'm going to do some more fitting to make sure everything's looking really good. I'm going to compare this angle to the old one we cut off to make sure that's proper. And then once we get all that figured out, I can scribe or draw this line right here with a Sharpie. Then we're going to come down a little bit and then to make our cut line. So that's where we're going to cut, because remember, we're going to flange this piece here. So this one sits right down flush on it. Then we can use some sheet metal screws to hold this seam tight together. And then we can go ahead and get it tacked, pull the screws out, weld in the holes, and then just weld the whole length. So, and some guys don't like to use flanges because they feel like they hold water. But if you flange it in such a way so the flange is actually facing downhill and your piece is protected from the water, then it can't get down inside. A lot of guys, insist on butt welding, and that's great. I'll butt weld myself. But if I can use a flange, especially in this case where I could put some screws in or clecos or whatever you have to hold these panels tight together, I'm going to go ahead and do it. The water running down the inside of this door is actually going to shield off of the flange since we're flanging this piece. I don't feel like it's going to be a problem. So that's what we're going to do. So let me fit this up a little bit. We're going to get this line marked, and I'll bring you back when we're laying out for the final cut line so we can get our flanging tool in here and get this flanged. All right, so I double checked everything and it all looks really good. I got the end to end clamped real nice. I took a piece of 1/4 inch. I got a piece of 1/4 inch by 1 it looks like here, and it's nice and straight. So what I did was I used that to clamp along here to make sure that the bottom skin of the door, which we dollied straight, but once you move all this stuff away, it may flex a little bit on you. So I've got it clamped in 3 spots. This, like I said, this is really straight. So that allows me to make sure that this piece isn't moving in and out on this panel, and then when I go to cut it, and then now all of a sudden it doesn't line up properly. So I just got a straight edge on here. It's just a piece of steel, and it's on there really solid, and I have it set just to the top of the skin right here so I can keep an eye on it, and it holds it all straight. So we just take a Sharpie, and we're going to Sharpie this line right here. Now this isn't our cut line. This is the flange line. So we're going to actually pull this off. We're going to mark around these corners too, so I just have some reference. We're not going to cut to these lines, but it's going to give me an idea where it's going to land once we start cutting stuff off. And I can cut proud of that and then sneak up on it with a grinder. So now we can go ahead and pull this off, and we can figure out what our flange distance is going to be. So the flanging tool, this portion right here is going to be up. So that line right there is going to be right along the Sharpie line right there. And we're just going to go along now. It'll only bend this part down, which is already kind of curved down, so it's not that big a deal. So what we need to do is calculate this distance away from that line, put a straight parallel line to this one, take the saw, cut it off, and then we can go ahead and flange all the way along there. Now this tool will flange right up to the edge right here, so we don't have to worry about that. But sometimes you have to plan around where you can get your flanging tool. Sometimes you'll flange or cut, leave a flange, and then you'll just taper it off at a 45 because you can't get the flanging tool in there. That's perfectly fine. So we're going to go ahead and get this laid out. I'll make some measurements, we'll make a line, get this cut off, and I'll bring you back. Okay, before we trim these ends here, I went ahead and cut this lip back. As you recall, this one was way too tall, stuck way up here. So I just laid it up here, scribed it, and then cut it off. I actually cut it off a little proud and had to do a lot of sanding to get it to go down in there. I should have put the cutting wheel right down the center of my scribe, and it would have gave me the relief I needed. But I sanded it, it's all done good, and it fits really well. So the next step will be to trim this back. And what I want to do on here is, since we're flanging here, I think I'm just going to go ahead and take this lip off right here, because this patch panel is a little long at the top ends on both sides. So down here it's the right length, but here it actually sticks past the edge of the door on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and take that flange off and cut that back a little bit there, and then do the similar thing right here, and then it'll sit down inside the flange right there. I may have to dolly it a little bit, and we may have to cut it back. And then this little lip that's left right here on the door itself, I'm going to go ahead and bend that down just a little bit, and then with this trimmed off, then that'll sit in its own little flange right there. We're going to do that on both sides. The next step for me is to get this 45 right here to match this one. Now I'd rather cut this one to match this, but it's a lot easier to trim this since it's off the truck, so I don't have to get in there with a Dremel or anything. So I'm just going to figure out what that angle is and then how much I need to cut off. We'll get that done on both sides. We'll get this. I'll do all that off camera. It's just a lot of back and forth fitting it and trimming in, that kind of stuff. So let me get that knocked out real quick, and then I'll bring you back. All right, after some fiddling, wasn't too bad. So I trimmed this back so it'll lay down inside the flange. I actually flanged just a little piece right here, just get me started. And then I cut it back. I cut it back a little too far. Got a little hole right there, but that's no big deal. I'll be able to weld that in, no problem. And then I cut this piece back. And as you recall, I screwed up at the other end, and I kind of cut that 45 a little goofy. So I went ahead and slid this about a 1/16 that way, and that basically fixed my mistake down there. So I got this trimmed up. It's fitting flush right in here, right on that where these two pieces meet. So we're going to be able to weld that, weld right along this edge right here. So we'll weld there, and right in here, and then right over the top and just right down. So, and then we'll be able to grind that up real nice, and it's going to look perfect right there. So, and we're going to do that on the other end, and that's going to pretty much get this ready. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done, and then I'll bring you back, and we're going to get this whole thing flanged and do the final fitting on it and see how it looks before we move forward with prepping it for welding. Okay, this video is getting a little long, so we're going to have to stop right there. We'll have a part 2 for the rust repair on the inside panel of this door off the Chevy truck. If you're new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, I've got a whole series on this truck. It should be right up here somewhere. And then check it out. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you like what you saw, give me that thumbs up. It really helps promote the channel. We'll see you on part 2.